What's up, everybody? Matt Gajeski here, back again with the Stokastic DFS channel. And it's my favorite time of the year. We're talking college football bowls, but not those early season bowls. It's Saturday, excuse me, not Saturday. That one's coming up. It's Tuesday, December the 27th. And that means this whole week we've got 3, 4, 5 games and a bunch of main slates to talk about. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. And if you're listening on podcast, make sure to subscribe over there, leave a rating and review. It helps a ton. And before we get started, we are presented by No House Advantage. They recently just upped their first match deposit bonus from $50 to $100. Yes, $100 first match deposit bonus. But what's No House Advantage? They're providing new and unique ways to play player props. They have a verse the house function, which is listed player props. You're making lineups of those player props and you're playing them against the house. It's a pretty standard traditional way to play player props. But they also have a pick'em contest. That's you versus other people in tournament style contests. You're making lineups of player props. They're on a confidence interval. So your most confident player props go at the top. And they have prizes as big as $25,000. And a lot of times these contests are overlaying. That means they're not filling. And even if they don't fill, they're still paying out all those big prizes. That can be a huge boost to your bankroll. So make sure to check out No House Advantage. Link in the video description below for that first match deposit bonus. Last thing, sorry about the glare, guys. It's like the time of day, my blinds are drawn. I cannot get this to go away. I'm recording in the afternoon, so apologies there. But we're going to bring you to the data tool anyway, so you don't have to look at my face anymore. It's a fun slate, and it's 4 games. We're going to kick things off with Georgia Southern taking on Buffalo. Last thing I'll say here. These are all staggered, so late swap's going to be key here throughout the day. But first game, it's a good one. Georgia Southern takes on Buffalo, 4-point spread in favor of Georgia Southern, 66.5 total. The Kyle Van Treese revenge game. He was the former quarterback for Buffalo, now the quarterback of Georgia Southern. That's going to be fun. We'll start with Georgia Southern. They're 10th in pace, 62% pass rate. They're running that air raid, and they've run it successfully, and they've overcome a lot of injuries. Van Treese is interesting here. 7,500 on DraftKings is a bit expensive. We do not have FanDuel pricing right now, so apologies there. But Van Treese is a pocket passer. The offense will often propel him to fantasy success. 326 yards per game for Van Treese on 46.5 attempts. He does have positive rushing yardage, but it's kind of a coin flip whether he ends up in the positive or the negative here. I wouldn't really expect too much of a pass rush from Buffalo. So this should be a game he's kept fairly clean. And the offense has been great. Only 6 sacks taken all year for Van Treese. So right away, he stands out to me as a potential tournament play. There's a couple other signal callers I like a little bit more, but he's definitely in the top half of players we want to be considering, even at the price. The backfield is tricky. So Jalen White was the leading back on the year, 193 touches, 84 rush yards per game, solid pass game role, but he missed the last contest. He was called day-to-day, so I'm guessing he plays here, which would make him the RB1 and a great price-adjusted option. If he's out, we go to Gerald Green, except he missed the last 2 games. Called day-to-day, so I'm guessing he plays here. When they're both active, Green is a change of pace. When White is out and Green is in, Green will be the lead back. Now, they were both out of their last game, and everybody anticipated O.J. Arnold was going to be the lead back. But it looks like he got banged up in the game. So they moved to A.J. Brown, their running back number 4. In this order, this is how you should prefer them, assuming they're all active. Number 1 is White. Number 2 is Green. Number 3 is Arnold. Number 4 is A.J. Brown. Number 5 is Tyler Jordan, in that order. So whoever's out, you can adjust from there, but that's the order they should use these guys most likely. They're good plays too. These are good pass-catching backs. You have to be in this offense. At receiver, doesn't get much better injury-wise. This team lost Amari Jones early in the year. He hasn't played in weeks. Derwin Burgess also has missed the last 2 games. He's out for the year. He's not going to play. They do have 2 elite targets up at the top in Caleb Hood and Jeremy Singleton. Jeremy Singleton is the stone minimum price on DraftKings. Okay. He had 17 targets last game, and he's the minimum. There's just no way you don't play him. So it's outside of just getting leverage with somebody else, it's very, very difficult to understand why he's so cheap. The wide receiver 3 is typically Marcus Sanders. He also missed the most recent game. and there's been no update on Marcus Sanders, so I have no idea if he's healthy. If he's in, expect somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 targets. If he's out, you're going to see Ezra Archie as the number 3. He's a rotational receiver, hasn't gotten a lot of time this year, but 8 targets in the last game. He essentially played almost every single route in the game without Sanders most recently. So I immediately have interest in him. Talking about the ancillary pieces, because this is a single game slate, is kind of difficult here. Evan Lester, their tight end, has gotten more run recently due to the injuries around him. His routes jumped up to 65% in the last game. I think he's maybe viable at the Stoneman. Definitely not targeted as often, but just a pure leverage play. You have guys like J.J. McAfee on the field on occasion. It's pretty thin outside of these guys. So price adjusted, I guess Hood is 1 still, but 2, Singleton. 3 is going to be Sanders if active, Archie behind him, then Lester as the number 4 or 5, the tight end in the offense. Buffalo, 85th in pace, 47.5% pass rate. Cole Snyder, the signal caller, he is a game manager in every negative sense of the word. Not really that mobile, 140 yards on the ground this year. Averages 230 on a passer on pretty good volume, 35 attempts. He just has not been able to get it done. I think he's certainly in the bottom half of signal callers we're going to want to play on this slate, but Georgia Southern's defense has been really, really vulnerable to the opposing passing attacks, 8.2 yards per attempt. So maybe we could get to him in contrarian builds. Injury concerns in the backfield here. Ron Cook hasn't played in 2 straight games. He was called day-to-day as well, so I think he's back. But again, the order of preference between these backs, like previously when everyone was healthy, Mike Washington and Ron Cook kind of split work almost evenly. You have Mike Washington behind Ron Cook slightly when they're both active, but including the 2 games where Ron Cook missed, that put Mike Washington ahead of Ron Cook in terms of total touches. They essentially have the same production, though. 602 yards for Cook on the ground, 600 for Washington. Mike Washington is a slightly more active target getter in the receiving game, but it's not by much. 10 targets separate them there. If they're both healthy, I view them as the 1 and the 2. And from there, Aljae Henderson should be the 3. He had to carry a large workload down the stretch because of injury, but then he missed their most recent game too, so his status also needs to be monitored. Assuming everybody's healthy, you have a 1-2 punch between Washington, Cook, and then Henderson as a change of pace. Everything would rotate a bit from there depending on who's active. In the receiving game, pretty easy to decipher here. Jen Williams and Justin Marshall are the top 2 options here. Williams has out-targeted Marshall 95-93. But Marshall has an edge in receiving yardage, 710 to 637. For 500 less, I'll just take Williams, but Marshall's a completely fine play here. No issues with either one of them. The wide receiver 3 should change. Jamari Gassett entered the transfer portal, so I think now you're going to see Marilyn Johnson take over that wide receiver 3 role for this team. That had kind of already been happening. Over the last 2 games, Marilyn Johnson, 81% of the routes and 58%. I think that's pretty clear at this point. And then the last thing to note here, Trevor Borland, their tight end, hit the portal. So I think Ray Embry and Robbie Mangus play a little bit more here. There's no reason to really play either of these guys because you have stone minimum, like nearly locks for 10 target guys on Georgia Southern. So I'd probably just Chen Williams and Justin Marshall, maybe Marilyn Johnson. Cole Harity is also like a wide receiver 4 they'll use on occasion. Just should mention his name. Utah State, Memphis, 60 total, 60.5 in some spots, 7.5 point spread in favor of Memphis. 2 fast teams. Utah State 21st in pace, Memphis 34th. Overall pass rate, Utah State is at 43%, Memphis is at 51.5%. Cooper Lagasse has taken over signal calling duties for Utah State after injuries really hurt this team. Levi Williams, Logan Bonner, both have gone down. Lagasse has 278 rush yards this year, but he's really struggled as a passer, just 163 on 23 attempts. They'll try to take the ball out of his hands if they can, and that to me makes him more of a bottom half of the slate quarterback. He's down there with Snyder rather than being up there with Van Treese and some of the others we'll talk about. But he's viable. You could play him in tournaments, I think. They do throw the ball when they need to, and if they're down in this game, they'll certainly need to. We'll talk about the stacking options in a moment here. The backfield is pretty clear, I think, here. you have Calvin Tyler's the lead back, and that's not changing. 21 touches per game, 87 rush yards. He has good pass game role. He averages 1.3 targets per game there. That's all solid for Calvin Tyler. He's just a bit expensive. I think if you can't fit him, wouldn't mind going to a different back. Generally, their change of pace is Robert Briggs. He hasn't played in the last 2 games. Watch his status. If he's in, he'll be a change of pace. If he's out, Jordan Wilmore will take over that role. Nothing more than a dart throw down there. But Tyler, he's a guy I have a lot of interest in. The receiving game, as you can see, is pretty condensed between the top 3 options for this team. Brian Cobbs, Terrell Vaughn, and Justin McGriff. They're not rotating a lot. Cobbs is a 31% target share, averages 70 yards per game. He's probably not expensive enough. I think you're just worried about efficiency. And honestly, you can jam whatever studs you want because of the Singleton thing on Georgia Southern. So I'll play some Cobbs. Vaughn would be a GPP pivot off of him. If you can't find the salary, I'm fine with him, but just 1-for-1, I'd rather pay the extra $600 for Cobbs. And then Justin McGriff, he hasn't been targeted as much recently, hasn't seen more than 6 in the last 3 games, but his routes are completely fine. I wouldn't be worried about McGriff. He's still on the field almost every single play. He's going to pop up for big games here and there. Then the last thing to really note here is tight ends are rotation. You have Josh Sturzer and Brock Lane functioning as the top 2 guys here. Not much rotation between them at this point, but they are using tight ends a little bit more than they were earlier in the year. When they don't use a tight end, Nine Davis is the wide receiver 4, but I don't have a lot of interest in any of these cheap guys due to the pricing of Georgia Southern. Memphis, again, fast, a little more pass heavy than Utah State. Seth Hennigan, I'd probably rank as my 4th highest quarterback on the slate. He's mobile, 313 yards on the ground, averages 275 as a passer on 35 attempts. He's solid, and I don't think you're really worried about Utah State's defense. They look decent on paper, but their level of competition has been downright horrific this year. The Mountain West is a bad conference. So you could play Hennigan without a doubt here. I think he's my 4th quarterback overall. Backfield, Brandon Thomas out for the year. That has sort of consolidated opportunity more to Jevion Ducker and Asa Martin. Between the 2 of them, just pricing leads me more to Ducker. There's not a lot working in favor of Martin outside of his pass game role. He is an awesome target share lately. In the last 4 games, target counts of 7, 3, 2, and 8. But now you have Memphis as a touchdown favorite. So does that get depressed at all here? And then Jevion Ducker had 4 targets in the last game himself. They haven't always used him in that capacity, but seeing the 4 targets at least should give me some confidence. So to find the money up to Martin doesn't make that much sense to me. I'd rather pay down for Ducker just in a vacuum. Sutton Smith will carry on occasion too. He's kind of the replacement for Brandon Thomas, but he honestly does not have that great of a role. In the receiving game, Memphis is going to rotate receivers a little more than some of these other teams. Your tight end, Caden Prescorn, actually leads the team in receiving yards, 5.2 targets per game for Prescorn. I think he's fine, but he's expensive. Javon Ivory is 2nd on the team in yardage. Again, Prescorn, 593. Ivory's at 585. And Ivory has almost 20 more targets than him, 15 to be exact. It's 73 for Ivory, 62 for Prescorn. And you look at the routes, not much separates these guys at this point. These are your top 2 very much so. And from there is where things get a little bit weird. Eddie Lewis recently popped up for a 94% route rate in their most recent game, but he's been pretty consistently behind Ivory at points this year. Eddie Lewis is the guy I would rank 3rd overall. He's also 2nd on the team in targets. And 4th would be Gabriel Rogers. He actually has 53 targets on the year, 433 yards, but he's played a pretty solid role of late as well here. We're looking at an 82% route share in the most recent game. My only worry with Rogers, that spike in routes we saw the last 2 games corresponded directly with Joseph Skates being injured. In the most recent game that Joseph Skates played, you had Rogers at a 43% route rate, Skates at 55%. Then Skates goes down. You see Rogers immediately jump back up to 76% and 82%. So if Skates returns, how does that play a role? I think maybe you see them split time a little more. Skates is the stone minimum. He actually has about a 50% route rate when he's healthy in his most recent playing time. Rock Taylor, he's just behind him. 5 targets apiece in the last 2 games, but Rock Taylor's route rates have been 44% and 33%, so you can tell not quite the most involved. Anyway, all that to say, that's why you don't see Javon Ivory, Eddie Lewis, and Gabriel Rogers popping as much in projections, because you do have ancillary receivers, Skates and Taylor and a couple other guys who get on the field for a few snaps here and there. Kind of muddies the waters for Memphis. Third game, my favorite game. East Carolina, Coastal Carolina, 65 total, 7.5 point spread in favor of East Carolina. They have a great team total here. 88th in pace, 55% pass rate. That is East Carolina. Holton O'Lairs, I think he's a top 3 signal caller on this slate. He is mobile, 134 yards this year, but he's been a 4-year starter. We've seen him with very good rushing ability situationally. Averages 283 yards per game through the air on 36 attempts, so the volume is solid. And Coastal Carolina's defense is horrendous, and the players they are missing will be key here. Won't go into the details, but they're down a few starters from the portal. So O'Lairs stands out to me as a price-adjusted option we want to get to. But we want to get to players across the board for this East Carolina team. Rajai Harris is out. That has thrust Keaton Mitchell into a monstrous role down the stretch here for this team. He has at least 18 touches in 4 straight games, with upside as high as 29 touches like we saw in East Carolina's finale. Just downright monstrous workload. Averages 120 rush yards per game. Not expecting Coastal to put up much resistance to Keaton Mitchell. Even at that price, he's solid. Marlon Gunn is your change of pace for GPPs. Because East Carolina throws the ball a lot, you get a ton of opportunity for Isaiah Winstead and CJ Johnson. Very little separates them on the year. You have 1,013 yards for Winstead, 933 for Johnson. Target shares, 28.5% for Winstead, 19.5% thereabouts for Johnson. In a vacuum, I'm trying to get to Winstead if I can, but a lot of this difference in target share occurred early in the year. If you isolate the latter half of the season, their opportunity is almost the same. So if you can't get there, no issues paying down for CJ Johnson. And then Jalen Johnson returned from injury 3 games ago. He has slid back into the wide receiver 3 role, but routes aren't consistent. Players like Josiah Hatfield rotate onto the field, Kerry King. Not a ton of interest there. Last thing to note here, tight end Ryan Jones is out, opted out of the bowl game. He was the 3rd leading receiver on the team. That should solidify snaps for Shane Calhoun, whose role was pretty depressed this year because of injury. Now with a month to prepare, he's already played 3 games since he returned from injury, and Ryan Jones out. We could see a bigger role for Shane Calhoun. The Coastal side, 114th in pace, 43% pass rate. The biggest story here is Grayson McCall is playing, and he's now an extra month removed from that injury. So all reports on him are glowing, expecting full health from McCall. The offense has been efficient, and East Carolina's defense is also extremely giving against the pass, 8.8 yards per pass attempt. Fantastic for McCall. He only averages 28.5 attempts per game, but as you can see, incredible efficiency, 263 yards there. He's mobile when he's not hurt, only 183 yards this year, but again, the injury plays a role. They run that option offense. Everything that we've heard on McCall suggests he's healthy here, making him a top 3 signal caller in my eyes on this slate. This backfield's incredibly difficult to get to. Now that we've seen Braden Bennett return, it's a 3-way committee. It's CJ Beasley, Reese White, and Braden Bennett. White would be the number 1 for me, slightly. CJ Beasley has actually been more efficient, but again, White has been injured for part of the year, so don't look at the differences in yardage and think too much of it. There's some injury stuff in here. That's why White is still more expensive than Beasley, but these are just dart throws in tournaments. So you can find better backs, more projectable backs overall. The receiving game is actually pretty cut and dry here. Pinckney and Jared Brown are their 1 and their 2 in some order or another. I kind of prefer Jared Brown for 500 less because he has a run game role. They're dynamic freshmen. But Pinckney has the massive target share of 32%. Brown's just at 22%. Efficiency is there for both guys. I think you can easily stack this offense. You even have Tyson Mobley as the wide receiver 3. He's averaging 4.8 targets per game over their last 4. And if you want to get really crazy for tournaments, Xavier Gravett, since he was injured early in the year, has taken on a larger and larger role down the stretch. He's now at 3 targets per game over the last 4. And to close this out, holy smokes, the toughest game of the day. Wisconsin, Oklahoma State. I wouldn't be surprised if you just fade this game entirely. The total is 45, which is way below all the other ones. 3.5 point spread in favor of the Badges. Graham Mertz is in the portal. They listed Chase Wolf and Miles Burkett as co-starters on the depth chart. But if you read any of the beats, I think we're going to see Burkett play most of this game. There's this dynamic in Wisconsin with Fickle coming in and hitting the transfer portal hard, including Nick Evers, that they haven't really gotten a look at Burkett, who's a player they had high hopes for. So I think he gets most of the run the bowl game. He's supposed to be mobile. We just don't have a big enough sample to really grade him at all. I think he's worth some flyers in the larger tournaments because of price, but that's it. Backfield, Braylon Allen hasn't transferred. He's practicing, so there should be some interest between Braylon and Ches. This team just runs the ball so much. They're 1/10 in pace, 42% pass rate. Both Allen and Ches could theoretically get there against an Oklahoma State defense, which is in shambles due to the portal. I think they're both fine. I'm going to play some Allen. I'm going to play some Ches. I don't know if I'm going to play them together, but I think you could do that in the larger tournaments. The receiving game, if you're following this narrative that Wisconsin's going to test out Burkett, maybe you see some volume for Tremere Dike and Skylar Bell, even Keontez Lewis. Those are your top three guys here. Tight end is Jack Essenbach. They're all priced in order of how they should be, but I think each and every one of them is a bit too expensive considering the alternatives on the slate. Like, I can't just justify playing Tremere Dike over Jared Brown or the equivalents in this Georgia Southern passing attack and so forth. They'll be low owned, I think, is the best thing I can say about the Wisconsin pass catchers. Oklahoma State dealing with a lot of the same problems that Wisconsin is. They're 7th in pace, 53% pass rate, but their signal caller Spencer Sanders left in the portal. So how does his absence affect the offense overall? I'm anticipating Garrett Rangel starting. He started when Spencer Sanders was out late in the year. You know, Gunnar Gundy got the first call to it, but Rangel's a freshman. He's not a walk-on like Gundy is. He hasn't really shown anything, but like players grow, so maybe you can say that. They do have most of their receivers, so there's a chance Rangel could maybe backdoor his way to production. I think he's the worst signal caller on the slate, though. And that's price adjusted. Like I would probably rank Burkett below him, but Burkett's 4,500, Rangel's 7K. From there, Dominic Richardson's in the portal. He was their lead back. They have run a 3-man rotation in his absence between Ollie Gordon, Jaden Nixon, and DeAndre Jackson, but it's kind of shifted Ollie Gordon's way. He had 17 carries in the most recent contest and 3 targets. It's 20 touches. I think he's going to lead a committee again here in order of Gordon 1, DeAndre Jackson 2, and Jaden Nixon 3. Nixon was kind of phased out too, so this could maybe even be a 2-man committee. And then lastly, receiver. You had a couple transfers. Langston Anderson's gone, Braylon Presley, but it looks like their depth chart's mostly intact. Everyone that you'd expect was listed: Brennan Presley, John Paul Richardson, Bryson Green, and Braden Johnson. Johnson, I think, is the wide receiver 1 when he's healthy. He's priced like it. I think Presley's the 2, and then I would rank Bryson Green 3 and John Paul Richardson 4 in order. But you still have Stephon Johnson. He probably comes in and out of the lineup a bit here. Jaden Bray is on the depth chart again. He hasn't played much this year, but this could just be a nasty rotation. Maybe you throw some darts on these guys, but ultimately a fully healthy Oklahoma State with a backup quarterback is dangerous, especially if these guys aren't consolidating their routes, which they did through most of the year due to injury. But that'll do it for us with the Stokastic channel. The glare's gotten worse, but I'm going to put my face back on the screen. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think of the video. Subscribe, hit the thumbs up button on the way out, and don't go anywhere. We'll be here all week breaking down everything you need for each and every slate. So thank you guys for watching. Good luck, and we'll see you again next time.